Welcome to Have You Read It, the channel where we bring books to life one summary at a time. Today we're exploring Henry Kissinger's On China, a fascinating exploration of China's history, strategic thinking, and its complex relationship with the United States. It's a long journey through thousands of years, so buckle up. Kissinger starts by emphasizing China's singularity. He talks about how China sees itself less as a nation-state and more as a civilization, almost a force of nature. Their history, stretching back millennia, reinforces this idea. Unlike other societies, China doesn't have a clear starting point. It just is. The Yellow Emperor myth isn't about creation, but restoration. Confucius didn't invent, he recovered. This gives Chinese leaders an incredibly long view, as shown by Mao invoking 1,300-year-old precedents for the 1962 Sino-Indian War. This sense of continuity is reinforced by China's geographic vastness, fostering the idea of the Middle Kingdom, the center of the universe. For a huge chunk of its history, China didn't really interact with other civilizations on an equal footing. There was trade and cultural exchange, but no peer competitors in the way Europe had. This isolation fostered a unique worldview. A crucial element in understanding China is Confucianism. It emphasizes harmony, hierarchy, and the importance of knowing your place. The emperor wasn't just a political leader, but a metaphysical concept, the son of heaven, responsible for maintaining the cosmic order. This worldview shaped China's approach to foreign relations, emphasizing impartiality over equality. Tributary states acknowledged China's superiority and in return received benefits. Kissinger contrasts Western and Chinese strategic thought. He uses the analogy of chess and weiqi or go. Chess is about checkmate, total victory. Weiqi is about accumulating relative advantage, surrounding your opponent. This difference is reflected in military theory as well, with Sun Tzu's Art of War emphasizing the psychological and political dimensions of conflict over brute force. Sun Tzu advocates for victory without fighting, achieved by attacking the enemy's strategy, alliances, and morale. This brings us to the clash between China and the West. The 1793 Macartney mission, intended to establish trade and diplomatic relations on equal terms, failed spectacularly. The British couldn't comprehend the Chinese insistence on the kowtow, and the Chinese couldn't understand why these barbarians wouldn't acknowledge the emperor's superiority. The Opium War further exposed the gap between these two worldviews. Lin Zexu's letter to Queen Victoria, demanding an end to the opium trade, perfectly captures the Chinese perspective. The British response was brutal, shattering China's sense of invulnerability. The Opium War marked the beginning of China's century of humiliation. Forced to sign a series of unequal treaties, the Qing dynasty lost control of its trade and diplomacy. The West saw this as progress. China saw it as a threat to its very identity. The Taiping Rebellion, a devastating civil war with millions of casualties, further weakened China. The arrival of Russia and Japan as imperial powers added to the turmoil, with Russia grabbing huge chunks of territory. Li Hongzhang, a key figure in this period, tried to manage the decline, using traditional strategies like using barbarians against barbarians, but to little avail. Enter Mao Zedong. He unified China under communist rule, but also launched a violent assault on its traditions. Mao's revolution was unique. It was a continuous process, with no end goal other than the vague notion of a great harmony, achieved only through constant upheaval and struggle. He admired Qin Shi Huang, the ruthless emperor who unified China but also persecuted scholars, showing Mao's willingness to break with the past. Internationally, Mao used ideology and psychology as weapons. He downplayed the threat of nuclear war, making the world believe he was willing to accept massive casualties. The Korean War perfectly illustrates Mao's approach. While the U.S. saw it as a war against aggression, Mao saw it as a preemptive strike to prevent encirclement and establish China as a force to be reckoned with. Mao also had to deal with the Soviet Union. While initially needing Stalin as an ally, Mao bristled at Soviet attempts to control China. Their relationship was marked by mutual suspicion, perfectly illustrated by Mao's 2-month stay in Moscow in 1949 to negotiate a treaty. The two Taiwan Strait crises further complicated matters, with Mao using them to test U.S. resolve and challenge Khrushchev's policy of peaceful coexistence. The crises involved nuclear threats by both the U.S. and the Soviet Union, all over islands of minimal strategic value. They show how Mao used brinkmanship to achieve his goals. The 1960s were a turbulent decade for China. The Great Leap Forward, Mao's attempt to rapidly industrialize, led to a devastating famine. The Sino-Indian War of 1962, sparked by border disputes, further isolated China. And the Cultural Revolution, Mao's attempt to purify the country through ideological fervor, nearly tore it apart. The Cultural Revolution was a period of intense domestic upheaval. Red Guards rampaged, destroying traditional culture. Schools and universities closed. Diplomats were recalled. China turned inward, cutting itself off from the world. It's hard to overstate the chaos of this period, yet even in the midst of this, Mao began to lay the groundwork for rapprochement with the U.S. Kissinger explores the road to reconciliation between the U.S. and China. Both countries were in turmoil. China faced hostility on all sides. The U.S. was mired in Vietnam. Yet both Nixon and Mao saw an opportunity in their shared animosity toward the Soviet Union. The Ussuri River border clashes between the Soviets and Chinese in 1969 accelerated the process, with Nixon realizing that a strong China was in U.S. interests. The secret trip to China in July 1971 was a turning point. The trip showed the U.S. delegation the Chinese approach to diplomacy: meticulous preparation, subtle signaling, and the use of hospitality as a tool of statecraft. Zhou Enlai, the consummate diplomat, played a key role, navigating the complexities of the emerging relationship. Nixon's visit to China in 1972 was a diplomatic triumph, culminating in the Shanghai Communiqué. The communiqué's language on Taiwan was deliberately ambiguous, allowing both sides to claim victory. More important was the shared opposition to hegemony, a thinly veiled reference to the Soviet Union. Mao further cemented the quasi-alliance in conversations with Kissinger. He stressed the need for a coordinated global strategy to contain the Soviet Union, even urging the U.S. to increase its military presence in the Middle East and cultivate Japan. He downplayed the importance of Taiwan, suggesting that China could do without Taiwan for the time being. The last years of Mao's rule were marked by internal power struggles and growing tensions with the U.S. Zhou's fall from grace and the rise of the Gang of Four signaled a more radical turn in Chinese politics. Mao's final meetings with Kissinger in 1975 showed his ambivalence. He recognized the need for the U.S. relationship, but also warned of a coming storm. After Mao's death, Deng Xiaoping emerged as China's paramount leader. A twice-purged veteran of the Cultural Revolution, Deng launched the Reform and Opening Up program, transforming China's economy and its relationship with the world. He abandoned the communes and embraced market principles, leading to unprecedented economic growth. Deng's visit to the U.S. in 1979 signaled China's new direction. He toured factories, met business leaders, and spoke openly of China's need to learn from the West. The visit also provided cover for China's invasion of Vietnam, demonstrating the limits of Soviet power. The Reagan years saw the advent of normalcy in U.S.-China relations. Despite Reagan's anti-communist rhetoric and support for Taiwan, he maintained the strategic relationship with China. The Third Communiqué of 1982, while ambiguous on arms sales to Taiwan, allowed the relationship to continue. The Tiananmen Square crisis in 1989 was a major setback. The crackdown on protesters sparked international outrage and led to U.S. sanctions. Bush, balancing his commitment to human rights with the strategic importance of China, managed to avoid a complete rupture. Kissinger played a key role in easing tensions, negotiating the release of Fang Liji. Deng's Southern tour in 1992 revitalized the reform program. His speeches, initially ignored by the national press, became the blueprint for another decade of growth. Deng stressed the importance of development and experimentation, dismissing ideological concerns. The Jiang Zemin era saw China emerge as a global economic power. Jiang, an affable and cosmopolitan leader, worked to restore China's international standing after Tiananmen. He oversaw the return of Hong Kong and China's entry into the WTO. The Third Taiwan Strait crisis in 1995, sparked by Li Tenghui's visit to the U.S., was another test of U.S.-China relations. Finally, we arrive at the new millennium. Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao, representing a new generation of leaders, emphasized harmony and peaceful development. The 2008 Beijing Olympics showcased China's resurgence. But new challenges emerged, including economic disputes and North Korea's nuclear program. The national destiny debate within China continues, with some advocating a more assertive role for China. Kissinger concludes by stressing the need for co-evolution, not confrontation. He draws a parallel with the Anglo-German rivalry that led to World War I, warning against a similar dynamic developing between the U.S. and China. He advocates for a Pacific community in which both countries cooperate on shared interests. So, the key takeaways from On China. China's worldview is shaped by its unique history and its sense of being a civilization, not just a nation. Its strategic thinking, rooted in concepts like Shai and Weiqi, emphasizes long-term planning, psychological advantage, and the avoidance of direct confrontation. The U.S.-China relationship is complex and has gone through many phases, from hostility to quasi-alliance. It is now entering a new era, in which cooperation is essential but not inevitable. Both countries need to overcome their historical baggage and develop genuine strategic trust. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.